This is the Dreadful Podcast from TV Podcast Industries, and we are talking all about Lovecraft Country, Season 1, Episode 4, A History of Violence.
Where in the hell did I go wrong with you, boy? Every time I tell you to do something, you do the exact opposite. I told you to stay away from this grand wizardry shit. You want to run chest first into some magical treasure hunt like a goddamn fool. When did y'all two sweet on each other? Foolish and crazy go well together. Pioneering.
You gonna help us or not?
What do you think happens when you find Titus's pages?
What happens if we don't? Christina was at my house, and we need to be able to defend ourselves.
Ain't one of y'all been listening to the news? We're the Reds in this fight. That means outnumbered, outgunned, fumbling to catch up. We already got one large gunning for us. You want the other 34?
How you know that's 34 logic?
I don't.
Welcome back, fellow Dreadfuls, to the Dreadful Podcast from TV Podcast Industries. We are here looking at A History of Violence, which is episode 4 in this season of Lovecraft Country. I am one of your petrified hosts, John.
I'm your other host, Derek. I had to have a glass of wine after this episode, John. This was massive, really interesting, really intriguing, really complex. Hopefully we can guide our wonderful listeners through the episode, and hopefully we've made enough sense of it to make a podcast that makes sense.
Well, lucky you, because I drowned myself in a barrel of wine after this, because yes, it was really, really good. Mm-hmm. Again, another really nice piece of TV making here from the makers and the actors in Lovecraft Country. Absolutely. Yes, it took us on our Indiana Jones fix.
True.
For one. It also taught us about a history of violence and, some really interesting stuff and development of the story around the Braithwaites for sure on this one. Really did enjoy it. But welcome, fellow Dreadfuls, to our spoiler-filled discussion here.
Yep.
We are very pleased to have you on board. You can subscribe to us over on tvpodcastindustries.com, and of course just search TV Podcast Industries on your favorite podcast catcher, whether that be evil or good, and you can subscribe to us there. Please rate us or leave a review. Any support from your continued listening of the Dreadful Podcast and of course TV Podcast Industries is really, really appreciated. And of course we're also over on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, and if you want to, you can support us over on Patreon as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, really good to have you on board for our coverage of Lovecraft Country. If you're just listening to us over on the dreadfulpodcast.com or on our Dreadful Podcast feed, as John mentioned, you can go over to TV Podcast Industries because we've just started our coverage of The Boys on Amazon Prime, a very, very different show, but a little nice antithesis to the darkness of Lovecraft Country, I think, to some of the more horror-filled elements of Lovecraft Country, let's say. It's definitely as bloody as Lovecraft Country over in The Boys. But we have released our coverage of the first 3 episodes of season 2 of The Boys over on our main feed on TV Podcast Industries. So if you want to get access to all of our coverage, go over there, subscribe on TV Podcast Industries, and you'll get access to that and our Lovecraft Country podcasts every week as well.
Yes, I would really love to know the blood balance actually between the two shows. You know, how many liters of blood were used in each show and balance it up. I always remember, I've probably mentioned this before, but my mum going to see Titus Andronicus, the Shakespeare play at the Globe in London, where I think that was the most blood used in a theatre production ever, because yes, Titus, maybe something in the name here, is a very, very violent play and was, by all accounts, at least from Shakespeare's point of view, a very, very violent person. But yes, I'd love to know the blood count here.
I keep meaning to ask her, was there a splash zone? Did she have to wear like, one of those,
like going to Niagara Falls?
No, exactly. Exactly. The raincoat, because I know this is not in the same vein at all, but I know the Ash versus Evil Dead, the Evil Dead musical has a splash zone where everybody gets covered in blood in the first 3 rows. So just wondering if Titus and
I think it probably did, given that you're stood right next to the stage. And of course, if you like the taste of sugary corn syrup, then I think it would be perfect.
Open your mouth. Yeah,
exactly.
Excellent. We're going to start off the podcast this week with another wonderful review from Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much to ShyMom100 who left us a review over on Apple Podcasts. If you want to leave us a review, pop on over to Apple Podcasts, find TV Podcast Industries and pop a review in there for us. We'd love to hear your review of the show as well. Shyman100 says, mystified by some TV shows, listen here for fun and intelligent discussions. Derek, John and Chris will intelligently discuss your favorite TV shows and help you make sense of them. Yes, I said discuss, not recap. If you're looking for intelligent, interactive and humorous discussion of different shows, look no further. They cover a variety of shows: Watchmen, The Boys, The Witcher, Star Trek Picard, The Umbrella Academy, Lovecraft Country, and on and on. The guys also often have fun contests that go along with the series. 3 Irish guys, no profanity, and informative podcasting. What more could you want? Tune into TV Podcast Industries. ShyMom100, that's a fantastic little advert for our show, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, ShyMom100. Yep. That's really nice of you to say. And I think, the reason why we say please subscribe, rate us, leave a review is it's really good feedback for us that we are in some ways on the right track with what we're looking to do. We've always said that we want to discuss TV shows first and foremost rather than review them. We want to come from that position that nobody sets out to have that show that just nosedives. They don't intend to make crap. It is art, and it is different views and different interpretations of what's presented, and we always give the benefit of the doubt. And even if we do criticize, we do it in good spirits. And I think that our only really negative review or discussion, I should say, that we've really ever done was probably for the Fantastic Four, Fan Four Stick. Because it's just the way it was.
Absolutely, yeah. But we will always point out when something's not hanging right or not.
Exactly.
Not looking right. But yeah, we absolutely will look at the series as a whole, even though we do episode by episode coverage of our shows. We do really enjoy chatting about what was presented and what the intent was behind it and what the influences were behind it, that kind of stuff. That's our intent of the podcast. So thanks so much, ShyMom100. As I said, if you want to leave a review for us on any podcast catcher, pop it on there. If you live outside of the US, or if you have put it onto a podcast catcher and we haven't read it out, pop us over an email and let us know where you left us a review. We'd love to read it as well. If you want to send any other feedback to us about any of the shows we cover, email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. We'll pick it up and we'll read it and discuss it on the show.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you can leave voicemail or audio if you go over to tvpodcastindustries.com, and there on the right hand side is the tab to leave up to 90 seconds of your thoughts, theories or discussion points for any of the shows that we cover.
Absolutely.
So fire away with your dulcet tones. But let's get into A History of Violence, which is episode 4 of Lovecraft Country. Derek, what are some of the episode details here?
Yes, the episode was directed by Victoria Mahoney. She directed lots of TV shows over the years, but recently was the second unit director on Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. So a massive movie as well.
Yeah, big stuff here. But I think coming into big stuff on the small screen as well with this show.
Yeah, super budget show on HBO for Lovecraft Country as well. So it kind of feels like a movie every week at the moment.
Definitely.
The teleplay, once again, was written by showrunner Misha Green from a story by Wes Taylor. He's an executive story editor on the show itself and also worked as a story editor over on Billions on HBO.
Oh, Billions. If only they were in my pocket.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Indeed.
But John, do you want to tell us what they all gave us with the synopsis for this episode? Let's see if we can make the entire show make sense in a couple of sentences. What do you think?
Sure. Montrose is drinking as he tries to confront both the pain of George's death and the knowledge he has consumed from the bylaws of the Sons of Adam. After Christina Braithwaite mysteriously shows up at her doorstep, Leti confronts Atticus about his attempt to kill Christina and his plan to surreptitiously return to Florida. Later, in search of missing pages to a crucial text from the Book of Adam, Leti, Tick, and Montrose decide to head to Boston to find the vault of Titus Braithwaite, and are joined by Hippolyta, Diana, and Tree on the journey. At the Boston Museum, an unexpected adventure ensues as codes, puzzles, trials, and tests face our heroes in the cavernous vault of Titus Braithwaite as they seek the ancient scrolls and try to stay alive. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, a handsome stranger nurses Ruby's disappointment over a squandered job opportunity, and at Leti's house on the north side, Atticus, Leti, and Montrose, along with an ancient hermaphrodite, exit the elevator.
Yes, exit the elevator from Boston that has led them back to the house in Chicago. This is something that's going to probably confuse most viewers. I think I get it. We've had a little discussion after watching the episode, and we hope we can present some clarification of what we think has happened in here. I'm sure there'll be more explanation next time, but I know there were a lot of questions at the end of the last episode, the murder house episode, where the bodies kind of appeared underneath the house with this huge cavernous vault underneath it, and I guess that vaulty area is in Chicago?
It was more
not?
tunnels.
Not sure. Yeah.
There's tunnels under Leti's home in Chicago, and it was so good. I loved the fact that all of a sudden, as these tunnels, which you still kind of think are somewhere under the city of Boston, are filling up with water, lo and behold, one of the three missing men who had broken into Leti's house in the last episode floats on by, and she still manages to recognize his distorted, bloody face. Yeah. And then
I think it's the T-shirt that you recognize.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I think having then the elevator there, that was just great. I loved that because you're just like, okay,
well, that's weird.
These 2 points are connected. It felt to me almost a bit like the idea of ley lines that you have in the UK. I think they have them as well in the US. But that idea of lines of magical, mystical power that sort of crisscross the globe. It feels a bit like that to me, and I thought that was awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you should have known they're worldwide, John, because Doctor Strange mentions the ley lines.
He does, doesn't he? Yes.
Your favourite comic book character.
I suppose it's always the only ley line I feel as though I know is the one that goes past Glastonbury.
Of course. I'm sure there's one near Stonehenge as well, right?
It's close by. Yeah. Okay. It's kind of in there, but like in which direction? No idea. Yeah. But I also remember them being described around New York as well. Yes. Maybe it was in Ghostbusters, actually.
Nope, that was where the Sanctum Sanctorum from Doctor Strange was, John. So again, Doctor Strange.
Okay. And I'm a fan. And wow.
That's your favourite comic book character.
Exactly.
I love it.
Never mind.
Let's get into our discussion about this episode of Lovecraft Country, though, John. You're going to kick us off with our adventure segment, I think, of the episode, because this episode was so heavy on adventure. I was so excited. I could hear the theme of Indiana Jones playing in my mind.
Absolutely.
And there was definitely touches of it in the soundtrack as well.
And also, whilst you didn't like the reference, there were touches of National Treasure as well.
Certainly were, yeah.
With old Nicholas going on as well.
Nicolas Cage, yes. The occasionally amazing, occasionally wonderful, occasionally
love National
weird,
Treasure
guy, yeah.
I love National Treasure.
That's true. I don't know whether you've showed me National Treasure yet. I don't think I've gotten through the full movie yet. So
no.
Maybe this might inspire me too. If Lovecraft Country has inspired me to watch National Treasure and it's an awful film, it'll be the only thing I've disliked so far this season from Lovecraft Country. There you go.
Yes, my main point is, Indiana Jones and National Treasure collide. The search for the vault of Titus Braithwaite and the pages, these missing pages of the Book of Adam, come crashing together in this lovely homage, in a sense, to those Explorer movies. I suppose. Yeah. It is obviously comes with, I think, a lot of caveats, but I really liked the idea. It is of its time as well. George Lucas with Indiana Jones always referred back to those matinee serials of action heroes back in the 1930s and 1940s that inspired Indiana Jones. And that idea of exploring and archaeology, I think also, and interestingly, George Lucas also talks about the 20th century archaeologists like a person called Hiram Bingham, an American academic and explorer who effectively made public the existence of the Inca citadel in South America, Machu Picchu. Oh, wow. And so I thought that the house in Chicago was owned by Hiram Winthrop. Yeah. All of a sudden, it may not be any connection whatsoever, but the fact that this was so much around exploration and the finding these scrolls was kind of interesting. I wondered if there was some kind of link there. Indeed,
that's an interesting idea. I wonder if they just took the name from Hiram Bingham. Is that it? I wonder if they took that first name and just combined it into this fictional story, so there's a little reference point to someone. Yeah. Yet they're not destroying his memory by some of the ways they describe Hiram Winthrop in the show, maybe.
No, but I mean, I thought it was just really nicely done, and certainly as they head to the museum in Boston, which Titus was on the board for, and there's this talk of him having extensive works done on the museum at some point, and I loved this whole treasure hunt effectively for the scrolls underneath at least what we think initially as being underneath the museum in Boston. Yeah. And, there's one slight reference where Leti says, we've been walking for about 20 minutes now. And so, they're big, but it comes to this huge chasm. It looks like the Mariana Trench or something, or maybe Cthulhu is kind of down there waiting to kind of pop up the odd tentacle.
Absolutely, we're getting Lord of the Rings vibes, maybe with the Balrog from Lord of the Rings.
Definitely,
kind of level of chasm that's there. Yeah,
but I loved all these different elements as they get to where the scroll is. You have the, well, which tunnel do I take? You have that mystery, and there's a clue on the ceiling. You then come to even just finding the vault. Yeah. So finding the vault, to me, it was that obvious location. It was where Titus Braithwaite's statue was, and it reminded me of The Last Crusade with the entrance to the tomb in the library, and the X marks the spot. Exactly. That obvious thing. And then you have the opening of this where Montrose says, turn off your torches, and the moonlight comes through and does this pathway of light to one of the alligators or crocodile that is aside Titus's statue, and Leti just moves the tooth and the vault opens. Again, this to me felt like Raiders of the Lost Ark, very reminiscent of Indiana Jones with the staff to see where the location of the Ark of the Covenant is. You have then, flooded vaults, and importantly, you have this huge chasm. And this idea of that leap of faith from The Last Crusade.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
But in this case, it's a dodgy looking piece of wood that seems to go way too far than it could. Yeah. And I just
what's attached to even having two people standing on a board that thin, you're expecting it to just snap. So realizing that it's a magic board as the episode goes on, as it starts to disappear behind them, you kind of go, oh, okay, right. So this isn't just a 2x4 that people have to walk across.
But only once it just keeps going.
Yeah.
I think what's really good here is they tie themselves all together. Leti goes first, brave lady, and at the vanguard. That not only is this a narrow bit of wood across a seemingly endless drop, but there is a huge kind of axe swinging in the middle of it. Tick comes across, and they work out to, time it and jump through. And then all of a sudden the board starts to disappear.
Yeah.
And you have Montrose joining them. They're all on this board with a code to solve. Which ultimately, and luckily for them, is something that Montrose has been reading as he's kind of been wallowing in his apartment.
Yeah.
And he's been reading the bylaws of the Sons of Adam. And the opening page is all about how Adam is pure, Eve is evil, she brings in monsters, God smites Eve.
Exactly.
Really, and he's able to provide that code to open the door to go through.
Absolutely, because I love how he describes it. He basically says, Montrose goes, I read the book, I committed it to memory, and then I burnt it, which basically, it's like that equivalent of, well, I've got the keys now, so they can't kill me. It's kind of this idea that's coming in from Montrose.
And then you have it's almost the Temple of Doom thing with the door that you have to put your whole arm into, and rather than there being bugs and spiders and all of that kind of stuff, it's almost like a blood sampler where it's checking to see that you are either Titus or a bloodline of Titus, and this opens up this trapdoor. And then
So what happens, sorry, quickly, just what happens if you don't have the right blood type? Because we see the guy's arm sticking out of it. Does another, massive saw come down and chop off the rest of your body from your arm?
Possibly, or a trapdoor opens from below and they fall into another cavernous pit.
Leaving your arm behind, basically. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Or a Shoggoth is released and decides to have a good old munch.
Because something else we noticed in that scene as well is that when Tick is putting his hand in there, he takes the ring from his pocket, the one that Christina gave him in the in the second episode. He still has that ring. I think we mentioned last week you'd noticed that he'd taken the ring off, but of course he's not going to wear this ring. It's representative of a society he doesn't want to belong to, but he does have it with him at least. And realistically, all the way from the beginning of this episode, Christina's the one that's pushing them on the whole path here. She's the one that told them about the pages. They've both done their research based on everything that happened in the Book of Adam, and the group that's led by the Book of Adam, I suppose. So it is all from Christina's push as well, has kind of led them to this moment. And she's also given them the tools that allow them to get in through it as well.
Definitely. I like the fact that Atticus had the foresight as well to bring that ring along, because we didn't see it in the last episode, and you are just kind of thinking, has he kept it? Has he thrown it away? What is it? But and I think certainly that feeds into his evolving view of Christina as well. I think something that you're going to talk about for sure, and I'll leave it to you because it's to do with your theory. Yep. So I don't want to steal that thunder. Yep. But yes, this trapdoor opens and we go into this wonderful world of One-Eyed Willy-esque Goonies with the pirate ship, with Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right, yeah.
To an extent. It's in a captain's quarters of an old 18th century wooden ship, effectively. That's what it looks like for sure.
It's what it feels. Yeah, certainly there's some elements like that, but again, that could be because we have those influences and we have seen those things before, like Pirates of the Caribbean and the Goonies.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the central things about Lovecraft Country as a story is the reclamation that was being done by Matt Ruff when he wrote the original novel, is effectively saying, there are all these stories throughout American storytelling, these events that happened, and they always have a white male protagonist at the center of them. And Matt Ruff's idea for this whole thing of Lovecraft Country was taking all those elements and let's see what happens if you put a black protagonist at the front, if you put a black female protagonist at the front. What happens if you put these types of people in this situation? Does it change the story in any way? Maybe it doesn't change the story in any way. It doesn't really. This is the same kind of excitement level that I got sitting in the cinema watching all of those movies, but what's added to it is their general experience and their day-to-day lives and
the different perspective. Yeah. And I think that's certainly, this comes absolutely crashing through with which is my favorite part of this, with all the skeletons sort of almost mummified. Actually, they're not skeletons, they're mummified, or they look mummified around the table, and at the head there is this mummy as well. And just that sequence where effectively Yahima comes back to life, this ancient hermaphrodite from an ancient people from the land of the many waters, which is a reference to Guyana.
That took me a while to work out.
And I loved this. It was just amazing seeing this. She calls herself man, woman, two spirits. Yes. And seemingly a native to Guyana, in South America, an Ameri Indian, a native people from Guyana. Just really, really good. I loved how Atticus was able to speak to her and she spoke back and you got the translation of what she was saying, and just the talk that I've never seen people so hungry before, always wanting to effectively consume. Maybe that is in part reference to that they were hungry, a bit like with the first settlers from Plymouth in the Mayflower, where they were helped by native American Indians and First Peoples. I wondered if it was something to do with that.
It's very similar, yeah. Like she even says that Titus arrived on a ship from America. He arrived in exactly the same way.
But even just the idea that it can be viewed in the sense that they're always consuming, and that consumption has brought them to this land which never had them before, and they begin to consume the land. And it kind of got me thinking, because I was there going, what's the history of violence here? And I know you have one side of it, and I think it works on two different levels, but, this idea of Titus Braithwaite being not only a slave owner, but an explorer, and how explorers were very much with or a part of, or actually led the colonization of other lands, other resources, other people, took dominion over them or wiped them out, for the sake of land and property. This idea of consumption, and that, interestingly, in this moment as Titus as an explorer, it's the same as with slavery, that it is just consumption of other people, environments, ways of life, cultures, that wipes out the variety, the difference, and is always on a power play of dominating these other people. And I really liked this tale coming through Yahima, through Atticus, and that, while she at the start had no reason to distrust him, that after deciphering a few parts of the text, it was only then that she realized the type of man Titus was, and what he was going to use this text for. And so therefore she refused and became prisoner in this place with her people, who he killed and imprisoned her with them. And I just thought this was this is probably such a common story, whether it's the conquistadors to Mexico and going through South America, or whether it's the British in India, in Africa, the Germans in Africa, the French in Africa, the Americans in going from East America to West America, the Brits with the colonies in America, all of this stuff, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I mean, you name it, it is like just so, the tentacles of this Cthulhu of colonialism just like goes through and around the world. And
it's such a weird concept, isn't it? Thinking about how little power, I suppose, some of these countries have nowadays. This idea that, you walk into a country, you bring your country's flag from Europe to a country you've never been to before, plant the flag and go, this is mine. I don't care who you are. I don't care who these native people that are on the land already are. This is our country. We've claimed it for ourselves. And because they're not advanced with weapons like you are in your country, then you can therefore take the entire country from them. That's the central concept. But in this story here, and what we hear from Yohima is the reason why she particularly was targeted by Titus is because she knew the words of the Book of Adam.
Absolutely,
she knew the
ancient text and the language.
Yeah, from the caves that were in her village, effectively her local area. So she had learned it all from reading it from the walls. So it's not necessarily that he's specifically there to claim all of her people. He's there to claim her and take her so that she can be of help in him finishing his goal, which is getting all the pages of Adam translated. And he punishes her for not helping him.
Absolutely. Titus's goal is very specific, but he in that specific moment in trying to target her because she can provide him with the interpretation and deciphering of these words. He is also part of that larger movement of exploration for the sake of consuming it, and in this case, her knowledge. I really liked that Yohima had the tattoos on their body, and they seem to be the ones that kind of matched with the ones at the Ardham Lodge. So this was really really interesting, and I don't know whether it's just because of the times that we are living in as well, but the fact that Titus was also a board member of a museum and had helped found it in Boston. That's kind of where I got that, one of the themes of this episode, this history of violence through exploration and I suppose the associated theft, I suppose you could say, of indigenous knowledge or the colonization of those lands in the broader sense. And also just because there's a huge debate with the British Museum, because the founder of that, I can't remember his first name, but it's Sloane, and they've removed his bust from the main entrance because, he founded the British Museum. His wealth was generated through owning slaves. Sloane Square would be one of the big squares that's also named after him.
Right.
He gave a lot of that wealth to founding the British Museum and I suppose other elements. And they have
to keep his legacy going.
Exactly. And so they had, this felt very much like that with Titus Braithwaite.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying that they removed his bust and put it in an area where it's now
contextualized. Yeah, so they've actually contextualized the bust of him, about him owning slaves and where he got his wealth from, what he did, and as well.
Absolutely. It's one of the most interesting pieces that's going on in the real world now, I suppose, is this idea of having a statue up and going, this is one person's accomplishments, and taking that one accomplishment out of their entire life, and people revering someone for the one thing they did that was good in their life. But this idea of taking those away, putting them into a proper situation where they're contextualized, where people can understand everything about them as a whole, as a human, not just the one good thing they may have done in their life. They may have been standing on the shoulders of awfulness as well, you know?
Yeah.
But also one of the other things that's in here with this reference to them going to South America, to Guyana, and finding someone there that can translate the Book of Adam, because Yahima has read these texts on the walls of a cave that is local to her. I think that's also a reference to the fact that, you know, in Africa, for example, that's where the first people of the world came from. They're closer to God. They're closer to the history. They're closer to our origins, effectively, as humans, whatever religion you believe in, but are closer to where humans originated, effectively, in these countries. And we have a white colonist coming to these countries and taking that, trying to steal the power from them. And the reason why they have that power, let's say, is because they actually are closer to our origins as humans than these white people from America are. Yeah. So I think that's part of the element that the commentary of the show is coming from.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought it was really interesting, and I found it just so fascinating. I think the other thing as well, just moving on then, is, and I suppose it links to the Indiana Jones, you get that wonderful moment where they've got themselves Leti, Tick, Atticus, along with Yahima, are all out of danger. So they've managed to get the scroll. Mm-hmm. The caverns or the tunnels are all raising up with water. Mm-hmm. And there is Letty's lift. They get in, and when she finally, another little bit of sort of tense, where the scrolls float back out and she has to go and get them, comes back in, and as they are ascended to safety in the lift, you get the big kiss between Leti and Tick. You know, that
absolutely.
It really felt to me like Indiana Jones and Marion Ravenwood, and I just thought it was wonderful that these two, in that moment of surviving and everything, kind of came together and had a bit of a snog there in the lift. Although I didn't see Montrose doing it with Yahima, of course.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second.
Well, he did something a lot worse.
But I think as an audience member watching this episode, I needed that moment because I was so tense. The ticking clock, which is the term that's used in writing to make sure the tension is ramped up throughout a TV show or throughout a movie. The ticking clock that's in there the whole time is so amped up in this episode.
Definitely.
You mentioned about, they've got to get across this board, across the chasm earlier on in the episode. That's the moment where I know I would be kind of going, you know what, screw this, I'm leaving. Somebody else can do this in future. I can't walk that board. But all three of them try and do that, and they make it across, and then the board starts to disappear. And then as the board is disappearing, they have to solve a puzzle that it's only because Montrose was brought with them that they actually were able to solve it.
I know.
That they have to do the arm in the hole, and then the water's rising, and then, as you say, they finally get everything together and they get back to the lift, and then the scroll that has all the information that they came here to get floats out of the lift again. And then, it's so much ratcheting up of the tension in this episode. I was so tense by that moment to have a second between Tick and Leti where they finally kiss, and they've kissed a lot more than kissed actually in the last episode, but they kiss again after kind of falling away from each other as we saw early on in the episode. But having that moment feels like, okay, now we can relax into the end of the episode. And of course, there's one last reveal.
Yes.
In those final moments.
Yes, there is. And it's the shocking murder of Yahima by Montrose, who slits her throat and, pats her on the shoulder, says, "I'm sorry," and does it. This felt like that moment where the crate with the Ark of the Covenant begins to burn through the crate. It was obviously no one dies in that. This is more shocking, absolutely. Yeah. It's on a more human level, but it is that moment where you think everything's all right, and suddenly, out of the blue, totally unexpected, Montrose murders her. For the only reasons I was kind of thinking,
we need to talk about it. Definitely.
It is because of what he knows from the books that he was reading and that he'd burnt, or maybe what George had said to him whilst he was by his bedside and moving him to the car. I mean, we don't know of any potential conversations here, but it seems to me that Montrose's main aim is to keep the family safe.
Yes,
it is that he didn't even want to go to Boston.
Yep.
He was being very reticent about sharing any information. Like, he knew where the vault would be. And Leti has this really great line that she says to Montrose, because she knows that he knows exactly what's happening, where they need to be to find this vault. And she says, you're going to keep your son chasing his tail when you know the answers.
Yep.
You know, and his response is, I don't want to walk into the game that Christina, is making you play. He is wanting to protect his family. He's seen his brother killed because of the Braithwaites. And he has been kidnapped. He is acutely aware of this. Plus, he's read these books. It may be something in their text.
See, that's the one I'm not sure on. Yeah, I know what you mean. There's definitely an earlier moment as well with Tick when he's in the library and he's going through his investigation with all the books, and he realizes that when he looks at the checkout slip effectively for every one of the books, he sees Montrose's name on all of them, and then he's kind of going, hang on a second, my father's like 10 steps ahead of me. You know, my father knows exactly all of this information, but he's still not sharing it with me. It causes that bit of tension between the two of them. And we have a couple of moments in this episode where we see the two of them being brought back together. Remember that they have had a relationship that has been completely separate for years on end. We heard that from the first episode with George saying that, his father had never contacted, Tick while he was away in Korea at all, but he always asked about him surreptitiously with George, so he does care about him, but he doesn't want to let Tick know. But we have two moments in this episode where he effectively says, your mother would be proud of you first time, and that makes Tick kind of get a little lump in his throat. And then right at the end here, before he kills Yahima, he tells him that he's really proud of him. And that kind of is something that you can tell Tick has never heard before from his father. He says to him that, I know you've grown into a strong man and a great man. And you can tell there's a real moment where, well, to be honest, even as me watching the episode, I was getting kind of choked up at the idea that this guy would reveal his heart to his son at this moment. And then almost immediately afterwards, he kills Yahima. So we now, in my mind, it means we have a big kind of question thrown over this character. And you're wondering whether Montrose, what the impetus is for Montrose to do this. Is it protection of his family, or is there something else? Is
he being forced to do something? Yeah. Who knows? But if Yahima is the person who can decipher the text, and that is what Christina is looking to do, or just the sons of Adam in general, then unless they bring her back like they did with Leti, if there's something in their spell book that they can do, they've suddenly lost their translator effectively.
Interesting, because now that you're saying it, I'm almost thinking that the only people that have lost a translator here are Leti and Tick and Montrose, because they've always had the pages of the Book of Adam over in their group. So,
but they've not been able to decipher it. Christina was saying only 1 or 2 pages of this text has been deciphered, and these are where their current range of spells come from. Yeah. And if only we could decipher the full text, imagine what we could do.
And she also didn't have access to the pages in the vault either, right? So, she didn't have the way into the vault that needed Tick.
So maybe it's just a physical copy. They need the text so that they can decipher it because they know that. But I also kind of felt from the story of Yahima that she was the one that had deciphered it for Titus. Yeah. And then she refused to help him anymore. So he effectively had kept her in stasis, not even in stasis, as a mummy, with the possibility of coming back to life, so that she would decipher at some point in the future. He may have even thought during his lifetime. Like the one thing that she says when she gets out of the lift is that she has no reason to distrust Leti, Atticus, or Montrose, but she's not going to decipher the scroll for them. And then, of course, Montrose kills her.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly, yeah. She should be just trusting everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, don't trust nobody. While we're on this piece, I was going to say a save it for notes, but yeah, massive congratulations to the people that did the special effects for this episode. Wow, the return of Yahima. See, that moment is so good. There were 5 movies called The Mummy where they tried to do an effect like this, where someone
a long time
is there 5
ago
or 3? Maybe there's 3.
A
it just
long
feels
time
like 5
ago.
because they're
Don't
awful
you
films.
be picking on The Mummy?
Awful films. But if they had this special effects team on it, maybe they would have been more successful as films, because that scene was so well done. I love how her bones are cracking and breaking and being put back together inside the kind of stringy skin that she has left, and then it starts to fill out.
It's so good, isn't it? It really is.
Cool.
And I love the reaction of Tick, Leti, and Montrose. It was just so good.
I am surprised. I know, again, if I was there, I would definitely be more of the let's get the F out of here. Like
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be like, okay,
surprised.
I'm running.
I'm surprised.
I think the only other thing I have on this is that chasm, Tick, Atticus, Montrose move a hell of a distance in space, as well as time, to get from being in Boston to Chicago, right underneath Hiram Winthrop's home, or former home, now Leti's. And effectively, I just wonder, we're told in this episode about the key to time travel from Hiram's orrery, which is that mechanical model of the solar system, which has now come into the hands of Hippolyta. We saw it very briefly in episode 3, and I think I mentioned on the last podcast, I was like, that didn't seemed out of context, but now it was just kind of throwing that reference because we saw it here in Hippolyta's business, and she's looking to try and fix this orrery that was owned by Hiram. But similarly, the ability to move across vast distances in a very short time as well seems to be there in this world, at least in the subterranean world. And I'm just wondering if that move across the chasm was the moment where they went from being underneath the city of Boston, or the foundations of the Boston Museum, to under the foundations of Leti's home in Chicago.
Well, there's a lot of magic at play.
There certainly is. Some kind of spell.
Yeah, exactly. There is some references in there. I know you mentioned about Indiana Jones and National Treasure being our references that we would connect to it again. This is set in the 50s, but it's referenced 100% in the episode of the show that this is also connected to Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Yes.
The kid that keeps shushing them in the library is actually reading the book. And later on we do hear Tick say, this is some kind of Journey to the Center of the Earth, you know, when he's talking about it. So the reference they have, I think, if I remember correctly from when I read the book, and it's been decades probably since I read the book and watched the film, the original film, my understanding was it's something like you can go down diagonally towards the center of the Earth, and when you rise back up from the center of the Earth, you arrive at a different point on the planet. It's something like that is in my head. So,
but it's a machine, isn't it, that they go down to the center of the Earth? It's a burrowing machine.
Yeah.
And you have then all like this lost world
at the center of the Earth.
At the center of the Earth, yeah.
But I just wonder if there was some kind of reference to that. They're going down deep into the Earth. They're spending a long time going down there, and they're coming back up in a different direction, maybe. I don't know. That's all that was in my head. There's some kind of magic in there, definitely. But yeah, it's a weird moment. We get it. But I think we understand that there's some transfer between Boston to Chicago across that board in the middle of across a chasm, effectively, that gets them some way connected back to
just because that in itself was a magical spell.
Yeah,
that board.
I just, for example, I wouldn't think that when tide goes low, they're going to be able to get into the lift and just walk straight back into the vault tomorrow. You know, that's my kind of question that's in my head after seeing what
that's
happened.
The complicating fact that they are talking about the tide at Boston when they're on the other side of the plank, because they still think that they are underneath the museum in Boston. But I wonder if it's something to do with groundwater with the Great Lakes next to Chicago. But similarly, it's who knows. It was just awesome though. I did like that jump. I loved that moment that they have gone miles from where they started. Yeah. And certainly to the point where you just get that reference with Hippolyta and Diana on the way back to Chicago from Boston, going, I don't know where they are. I don't know how they got to Chicago. And
so how did they get back home again?
Exactly. Going without them telling her, obviously.
And
so
speaking of which, that kind of sets up the next episode for Hippolyta and Dee. They're off to find out some answers about what happened to George.
Yeah, in Devon County.
So they're going to
be careful.
Be putting themselves in some serious danger in the next episode, definitely. I'm going to take a really tiny point, but a really important point, because I think we've talked a long time about this episode. It is a very dense episode, so we were absolutely right to talk about it. I think as the central kind of theme of it. But I have a huge question from this episode. I did mention on last week's episode that I was reading the book. I've stopped reading the book now because there's no point when you're watching a TV show reading a book alongside it, because things are happening in a different order and I didn't want to spoil anything for myself. So I have stopped, but I do have a big question. I mentioned before that in the book there is no Christina Braithwaite. There's only a son of Samuel Braithwaite that's mentioned in the book. I suddenly have a question in this episode where Christina is involved as to whether she is blonde-haired, blue-eyed William. If that is also Christina, is she using some kind of glamour magic to translate herself into this character of William? You know, is that why she laughed in such a weird way when asked whether William was her boyfriend? And she replied with, well, he's a friend and he's also a boy. They're not boyfriends. We haven't seen the two of them in the same scene together. The character of William allows her to go to places where she's not able to go at all. She's pretty confident as a person herself, but there are places where she's not allowed. So is William's presence, is her version of William, is that what allowed her to get to that meal? For example, in episode 2, it allowed William to go into the room where she's not allowed, effectively. Yeah. So I wonder, is she using some kind of magic to translate herself into this character of William? And I will say the show does help me out quite significantly. I'm hoping that I'm not sounding really stupid here. There is a moment where we see Christina walk behind a statue and turn to the left, and then almost immediately afterwards you see William walking out. So that is there in the show. So I don't think it's a massive leap. It's
that moment in the show where I went, I think we need to rewind this, because she's coming back to her home in Chicago where she's staying, and she's being watched by 2 undercover officers from the Chicago Police Department. And she walks up the path and to go into the house, to the front door. Yeah. And very quickly William walks out, and it could simply be she's gone in and said,
tapped him on the shoulder and said, look, people follow me, take care of me, kind
exactly
of thing. Yeah.
For me, in that moment of needing to rewind and check, was because it seemed really, really quick. That's when the theory that you've just mentioned sprang to life. So let's see. It's really interesting to just see, are these two one in the same? Yeah. And that theory would be really good to find out if it comes true.
Absolutely. Because I wonder, you know, even towards the end of the episode, we have this reveal of Yahima being of two spirits, of being male, female. You know, I wonder, is that something that she's tapped into? You know, again, Yahima is the person that knows the texts of Adam. She knows about the spells. Has Christina tapped into that she also knows this spell where she can be two sexes, can be two spirit, you know? Is that where it's coming from?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I really like the idea of glamour, a bit like with vampires. Just because George's favorite novel is Dracula, or one of them is Dracula. I think also the other point just to draw from this is that she has this run-in with the Captain Lancaster from Chicago Police, who is part of the Sons of Adam Lodge in Chicago.
And this was the a-hole who was beating on Leti last time, telling her how could it be possible that you could own a house like this? That's that guy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Asking her very specifically who gave her the money to buy that, who is funding her. And what we see here is Christine keeping it very close to her chest, her cards, not telling him that she gave Leti the money to buy the house. You know, this is the grand scheme at the moment of Christine. Oh, he absolutely has his, he must have his suspicions, hence why she's being followed, but he doesn't have the proof. But yes, she is very cagey to Captain Lancaster. And of course, that was just kind of, again, another little throwback to the last episode with this guy. Because it was, at the time, I was wondering, you know, is he just doing that for, you know, because to me, in that moment, it came across as him just being racist and misogynist, and that someone like you can't buy this house.
Yeah, and he was.
Yeah. And he, no, exactly, he was. But what I mean is there's more to it. Exactly. There's also another level in this. It's a bit like with the history of violence thing. I've come at it from this idea of exploration and so on, and primarily around Titus Braithwaite as an explorer, slavery owner, that kind of thing. And you also had the great kind of more personal and character-driven view of the title of this episode.
Yeah, that's right, because I completely
around Montrose.
Yeah, I completely forgot to say the opening of the episode opens with Montrose drunk and hearing the voices of what it sounds like himself as a child asking not to be beaten by his father. We heard those stories from George. So there is so much violence in his past. And then the bookend to the episode is him taking out some violence on Yahima to solve the issue, killing Yahima to solve the problem he has. So he comes from a history of violence, which is repeating itself almost. That's his way out. That's the thing that he'll do, in the future to solve his problems is resort to violence. You're right, John. I completely forgot to say that, but yeah. Some really interesting other stuff that happened with Christina, to get back to that side of things in the episode. I absolutely love that the priestess that Leti and Tick got over last episode to solve their ghost problem in the house actually has formed a block so that Christina can't even get into the house. So effectively the way that it seems to be playing here is that Christina bought this kind of mansion. Almost. She gave enough money to buy the mansion, let's say, to Leti. It's not a mansion. It was very run down, but it had 15 bedrooms in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. An elevator. It's got a lift in it.
Exactly. And it seems like she gave her all this money, and all she wanted was this replica of the solar system, this orrery. That's all she wanted, right? So she gave this massive amount of money, which is nothing to her. She has billions of quid, available to her, but she gave all this money and she can't even walk inside the doors of this house. I love that idea. I love that there's, again, let's take on the vampiric element to it. There's a blocker there on the door. She can't be invited into the house. She can only be allowed into the house if Leti gets rid of the protection. So she can't just walk in the door, even though she's the one that did it. And I love Letty's response is, "Oh, you're the one that gave me the money." Well, it doesn't matter. My names are on the deeds. Nice.
Exactly. Although it may not matter that she can't get in now that the orrery is in Hippolyta's shop.
Of course, yeah, but she doesn't know that. That was her only lead to get to the orrery.
Well, that's true. Yeah. That's true.
Well, and then the final little bit that we need to talk about in here, because we need to talk about it, definitely a setup for next week's episode, I'd say. William, who is maybe Christina, hooking up with Ruby. So we have Ruby going in to try and get this job that she's been talking about with Leti. In the past, she talked about this idea that she wanted to work in this department store down in town. Leti kind of told her just to go for it, like I would, why don't you get down there and do it? She's all dressed up to the nines, gets down there and finds that there's another black lady there who has a job in the shop. And instantly she is completely deflated and walks away. Instantly. and goes, there's 125 different employees in the shop. I think she says only one of them is black. There's no way they're going to hire two of us, Yes. So this has got her down. I was going to comment on this. I mentioned that I absolutely love when I hear Ruby singing. The actress has such a beautiful voice. She has a great voice when she's up on stage with loads of people, and the scene cuts into her in the bar and she's sitting there with a guitar, and I was going, ooh, no, maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe she doesn't have the greatest of voice, or maybe she doesn't play guitar very well. But that's the whole setup of the scene, is that she's so annoyed that she just isn't playing
exactly.
Well. I love that the audience give her a slight clap and she's like, well, F you too.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it was really good. And of course, William promises, I suppose maybe menacingly, that he can change her world. And I think Ruby, in her drunken state at the bar, seems to think that this is just a white man coming on to her to hook up with a black lady.
It's another person saying the same thing over and over. I'll save you, come back with me, come back home with me, and then dumping around the street the next day.
I think over time she feels that it's maybe more than that, because he does say, I fulfill my promises. And I still wonder whether Ruby's thinking about getting the job, that it will be... Is that all she's thinking about with doing it?
Maybe.
Because I've now got awful visions that Shoggoths are going to issue forth from Ruby. Like, it's almost some kind of alien thing's going to happen.
Right.
Interestingly, as well, William has got some kind of scarring on his chest as well.
Almost tattooed, like almost ceremonial is what it looked like to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it didn't look like just natural scarring. It looked like it was there for a purpose. I'm going to challenge you slightly, John, on your opinion about what Ruby thought at the end of that, because the final line that they say to each other, drunken in the bar, Ruby says to him, this is never, ever going to happen. I'm not going home with you, just before she arrives at his home to have sex with him. So I don't think she believes that it will lead anywhere. I think she just got really drunk and went home with the guy to the bar.
She certainly got pretty drunk. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be very intriguing to see what William / Christina has on offer for Ruby next week's episode. But that's gonna be a fun storyline, I think, when we get there. That's kind of it for my very small point in our massive long discussion, because it was such an interesting episode to discuss. I do have a few notes from the episode. Have you got anything, John, or should I hop into my notes?
No, I think all my notes are done and dusted.
Excellent. Two that I just thought were really interesting in here. This is the second reference we've had to the Tulsa massacre of 1921. Montrose talks about the fact that the book and the burning that he's doing of the book in his apartment smells like the Tulsa massacre, or smells like Tulsa is what he says, excuse me. And there was a reference in episode 2 where George was talking to the lady that came to his mind. The two of them were talking about the times they spent together and talking about their times in Tulsa. The Tulsa massacre was something that we saw back in Watchmen. It was the first time we'd seen it.
I'd heard about it.
About it, yeah. We didn't see it. You're right. It was a dramatization of the moment in Tulsa. It's an awful piece of history, but it would make sense that part of that would form a segment of Montrose's history, and it would be something that he would remember for the rest of his life.
Definitely.
Also want to mention Hippolyta in the episode, because I do think she has a good through line in this story. She's becoming stronger and stronger since the loss of her husband. Herself and Dee have a really good relationship, her daughter, which we didn't mention in the first episode. Being massive comic fans, John, we should have mentioned that.
We should have, shouldn't we, really?
Dee is a comic book writer. That's her. Yes. That's what she does all the time.
And actually, it was really cute that she gave George a copy of her latest edition that he was reading as he goes on the trip, on the road trip in the first episode. So really, really good. And, her and Atticus seem to have this really great kind of connection, which is really, really nice in the show.
Definitely.
I suspect that in the next episode, she's going to get embroiled in something horrific.
I think so.
In Devon County.
I think so, yeah. But one of the things I really liked about the relationship between Hippolyta and Dee was just that time when they were sitting in the planetarium in the episode, where Hippolyta's actually telling Dee that she had a moment when she was young where she discovered a comet and she was going to call it Harriet's Chariot. That was the name that she was going to give to this comet. But when they found out that it was a black girl that had given the name, they gave it to some other white kid, because they didn't want that to be the legacy that was given to this comet. And that kind of turned her off from being involved in any organized version of astronomy that she was involved in. So, it's a really sad kind of moment. And I love that Dee's reaction to it, because Dee just seems like this strong, vibrant character. She instantly just shouts at everybody and goes, "My mom named that comet, and its name is Harriet's Chariot," you know. So I just thought that was a lovely moment.
It was great, actually. I loved that. Because I really liked how with Hippolyta, she goes, "You know the truth. That's all that matters to me." And the response from Dee is, shouting it from the rafters as a proud daughter. Really, really good.
Now they all know the truth too, Mom. Yeah,
so
I love it. I would suspect that Hippolyta's naming the comet after Harriet Tubman, a very famous figure in American history. Harriet Tubman was an abolitionist in America, so I would suggest that's probably where she got the name from. But I love the idea of that being Harriet's Chariot that's going across the sky rather than Halley's Comet or whatever the other name that was given to the comet was. I think that's would have been a lovely tribute, I suppose, if she'd been allowed to name it.
Yeah, and the chariot reference as well to the Underground Railroad of moving the liberated slaves through that system in that railroad chariot, I suppose. Really, really good.
Exactly. And one final thing that I just loved about the episode, I loved the discussion between Montrose, Tick, and Leti, where Montrose is telling her all about their historical family who came up with the knot that would keep them safe. It's a magic knot. That's how he was able to be their former slave ancestor. That's how he was able to keep safe the entire time that he was a slave. And then as she walks out on the board, Tick says to Montrose, "But we had no slaves in our family since they're called Freeman. That's their surname. They never had slaves in their past." And Montrose goes, "Well, she's walking on the board, isn't she?" So I love that he's made up this really complex story. You know, it kind of shows you that
was really good.
Yeah, that kind of shows that while Tick is the really smart, learned one in the family, Montrose is also a very smart person who can make up this kind of story. So very cool. Really enjoyed that. That's it for our thoughts about the episode. John, any final thoughts about the episode? What do you think?
Loved this episode. It was just, it linked back to it's just continuing the link through, I should say, on all of these episodes so far. It added this great look at the explorer, I think in the purer sense of the word, also with the, discovery with, the reference to Jules Verne's, The Journey to the Center of the Earth. Really, really good. I loved it in the vaults underneath Boston Museum with Titus's vault. I thought Yahima and her story was just amazing, and the sequence where she becomes reanimated, almost she becomes hydrated from her mummified state was so good. And there's some nice little connection here with Christine in Chicago doing her sort of slightly underhand cagey work. There's some great stuff as well with, as you say, bringing Hippolyta a little deeper into this through the lens of her husband's death, and certainly that her and Dee are going to go on a journey of discovery for sure when they get to Devon County. Absolutely. So I really absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this episode, and that's why I would give it 5 Woodies out of 5 in reference to the car, who can hold the entire of the South Side, according to George. I love the fact that just gets filled up as well. You can see it. Why is Hippolyta and Dee coming to Boston with us? Because how are we going to get there if we don't use Woody? And then Tree also comes in as well. And it's like Hippolyta's, join us. You can get the lift to wherever he was going.
Like, it is interesting, isn't it? When he
so it's nice.
Yeah, when he arrives, he says he's on his way to, I think it's Philadelphia, to go and meet another girl. And then suddenly it's like,
he's in Boston.
Why is he in Boston?
Yeah, exactly.
Why is he going on our tour of the museum with us? You can see how angry Tick's getting. Like, it took me a minute to recognize the character. He was back in the house party that they had in episode 3. He's the one that was basically saying to Tick that, if you're not going to take her, I'll take her, about Leti. And then we find out Letty's kind of going, I've already been with you when I was younger. So.
Leti does a great put down on him as he's trying to puff out his chest, throw back his shoulders, and talking about his extra leg that he carries in his trousers.
Yeah. Absolutely hilarious. Like, I would have known that we were together when we were younger, kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly.
Really good. Thanks so much for that, John. We are going to go into our feedback section. We got some great feedback in over the last couple of weeks. If you want to correct anything that we've missed or point out things that we haven't talked about, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with any of your thoughts. You can also join us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. We put up a spoiler post over there where you can put in any of your thoughts about the episode. Feel free to spoil everything about the episode because that's the place to talk about it. Over on Twitter, the Soul Man wonders, is George coming back as a vampire? He's turned blood drunk with this newfound power and wants to either change the others, and if they refuse, he'll feed off them. I'm probably 100% wrong on this, but they just keep referring to Count of Monte Cristo and Dracula. What do you think of the theory, John?
It is always good to have theories. I like this one from the Soul Man on Twitter. You mentioned it as well again in this episode. There's a vampiric kind of theme running through this. I don't know whether it will be George or whether it will come from something else. I'm just thinking Christine and William, if they're two separate people, but even Samuel, they're all very pasty white as well, which is another kind of little reference. That's kind of fairly vampiric. George's favorite book. I would love to see George come back, and if he comes back as a vampire, so be it. Hopefully one of the good ones.
Yeah, didn't William also suck on some blood from Ruby's hand when she cracked it on a glass while they were having sex or while they were getting ready to have sex? So,
he did.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of that. Definitely want to point out, though, as mentioned in the episode with Christina here, and I think I also heard it on the official Lovecraft Country podcast as well. Don't forget that Leti died in episode 2 and came back to life, and the wounds that she had were completely cleared when she saw herself in the mirror. So while George is the fan of the vampire book and Dracula, Leti is the one that has died and come back to life. So there are possible repercussions to come. Christina does kind of call out, do you feel a bit weird having come back from the dead kind of thing? So, so potentially that's our vampire. We'll see. We'll see if we see her.
Interesting.
Maybe she'll just be eating very rare steak, from now on. Thanks so much for that, Soulman.
Yeah. Thanks, Soulman.
Yep. Will be also corrected my complete error from last week. We had heard of Ruby's brother and Letty's brother before in a previous episode. Will be pointed out that the brother of Leti and Ruby is Marvin, played by Demetrius Gross. They stayed at his house on the way to Ardham in the first episode. Leti was supposed to stay there, but they got into an argument and he kicked her out, and that's why she's on the adventure. So very stupidly, I should have noticed that. The reason why I was saying it was Ruby was kind of going, why didn't myself and Marvin learn about the inheritance that we all had? You should have told us immediately, Leti. It was definitely in there. I just missed it.
I have to say I missed that too. Thanks for the call out, Will be, because I kind of missed that for some reason. I knew it was family. I just kind of assumed it was an uncle for some reason, or a cousin.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking of Letty's brother. I mean, having said that, they got into a massive stonking argument, which can only ever be family related, and certainly not once removed with cousins. It's very rare to get that deep into an argument. So good spot and good correction for us for sure. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Will.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, over on Facebook, Donald Dennis said, "Wow, so intense. I have questions about the ending. Did the house clean itself, or do they know about the ultra sub basement?" Good question. Yeah, whether it's a self-cleaning house, which, to be honest, maybe we could all put up with a few dead bodies if it did the hoovering and the polishing.
I'm not too sure what that actually means. I think you might mean just clean up after the murder. I thought this is a really good question. I don't think it actually is answered in this episode either. I was wondering when we got to the end of the episode, when I read this piece of feedback, whether that would be answered from what we saw here, that there's something happening there. There's certainly some form of spiritual element in there. But from Donald's question is around episode 3. When he said it, I was thinking back on the episode and trying to think, did Leti, Tick, or Ruby ever see the bodies of the 3 racists that came into their house and were murdered by the ghosts?
Yes.
Because I don't think they actually saw the bodies. And I think there's a moment where Letty's asked what happened to the neighbors that disappeared, and she goes, well, I don't know. And I think in my mind, I was kind of going, she's smirking on the inside because she knows these racists are dead and she put them in the basement, is what was in my head. But when you think back on it and you go, well, actually, the ghosts in the house killed these people while Leti and Tick were in the basement and they didn't see them. And then the house just disposed of them themselves, kind of like the Shining hotel, or the hotel in the Shining, where it's able to do something significantly more than you think a house would be able to do, or the ghosts have done this and hidden the bodies in the basement. But it's not connected to this week's episode. It's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I have to look back over episode 3, and thanks Donald for this, because I kind of thought that they did see it. I have this recollection that they stumble across the whole headless body from the lift, but I'm questioning it now. Right. So I need to check. But yeah, it would fit the Hell House and that kind of idea, or the Hell Hotel, as with The Shining. That idea of a sentient house, for sure. So yeah. Good question, I think, Donald.
Absolutely. And we did mention last episode that there is a thing about the structure of the episode where it's jumping through multiple days. It's going, we're on day 2 and then it jumps to the next day. And there's bits of the narrative that are gone from the show on purpose so that it doesn't feel like you're watching every single day playing out. So potentially, there's something that just wasn't shown on screen, which showed why those bodies ended up down there. But yeah, again, it's, this ultra sub basement that they went down to, that they put the bodies down there. But in this episode, the only thing that might connect it in this episode, they seem to be fully aware of the lift being in Letty's house. When they find the lift, they seem to be kind of going, oh, that's the lift in your house, Letty. And don't seem as surprised as I was that lift is in Boston.
That's true. That's true.
But maybe that's it. Angie, our host, also said, another amazing episode. I was with Leti and her baseball bat. Smash those cars. The whole thing was very scary and gruesome. Loved the guillotine elevator.
Oh, absolutely. The guillotine elevator. You just have to love crazy elevators, for sure. And I'm with you, Angie. Yeah, because I was also with Leti and her baseball bat. I thought, you smash those cars for
Absolutely.
sure. Really good. And finally on Facebook, Mike Malone says, Derek mentioned reading the book along with the show. I've read up to this point, episode 3, and I'm really impressed that the locations, sets have matched so closely with the settings described in the book. From the racist diner to the cabin in the woods to George's office to Letty's house, the show has been spot on with my mind's eye, having already read the book. Impressive show design. Also, the Atticus-Leti relationship is so well crafted and acted to this point. One moment stood out when Tick joins Leti in the restaurant booth and she mentions her first time at the house party. We see Tick shift around to move closer to her in the booth. It's such a small choice, but says so much about his feelings for her and his intentions to support her no matter what. Very impressed with this show so far and appreciate your coverage of it. Thanks, Mike, for the feedback and the discussion. I haven't read the book, so but I know Derek has also mentioned how closely connected and linked in with the kind of pacing and descriptions the show has given. And I agree. I'm really enjoying Atticus and Letty's relationship. It is really nicely nuanced, and
Definitely.
I think that whole moment in the booth around the first time at the house party, it was a really subtle choice, and one that, as you say, really shows his intentions to support her, as well as being, he has this attraction to her, absolutely, but he himself, Atticus is not a monster in this monster show in that sense, and it's really, really good.
He's so lovely and protective of her in this scene as well. It's a great, great moment to call out, Mike. Totally agree with you. The production design on the show just feel exactly like they've gone to the text and gone, this is what it should look like, and translated it directly out of my mind onto screen. It's really, really good. Really like it. Thanks so much for that, Mike. Really good feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Yeah. One of the pieces of feedback that we got in from Will B over on Twitter, one thing that he pointed out to us that we didn't notice in episode 3 as well. Thanks so much for this. The kid who is on the Ouija board, one of Dee's friends, who asks the question about will he enjoy his trip down south. This is fascinating. This is a pretty deep one for
this
the production
is great
design.
stuff.
Yeah. This kid is actually Emmett Till, who's a reasonably well-known historical figure in the rights movement in America. Emmett Till was about to go on his trip in 1955. He went from Chicago down south. He was 14 years old and was accused of chatting up a white woman in a grocery store while he was on his holidays in the South, and was lynched by a mob and killed at 14 years old. And it's another reference that's in this show, a really deep reference, because he asks the Ouija board whether he's going to enjoy his holiday, and the Ouija board responds to him no. Like, okay, that's a pretty serious moment in the show, and a pretty serious reference for how they've done it. He's effectively wearing exactly the same outfit.
Yeah, the production design's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, the tie is very distinctive, and they have that down to a T.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those, like, sad and utterly horrific and despicable stories, presented or hidden in plain sight. And it's really good, because it's not something certainly we would have known about that case, or that incident. And, that's great feedback. Thanks so much, Will B, for that. What a sad story, though.
Absolutely.
To be honest.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that, Will. Final piece of feedback from our wonderful friend Steve Brown on voicemail.
Hey guys, it's Steve, and this is for episode 3 of Lovecraft Country. Wow, there was a whole lot going on in this episode, trying to pin down the whole days and who is what, and wow. I'm gonna have to definitely watch it again. So I'll be doing that, watching it again. Maybe I'll try to send something in before you send out the next episode on 4, but wow, it really is a good wow, it's a good episode. Just a lot happening. All right, I'll add to this in a minute, or a day or two. So I'm rewatching now, and 2 things jumped out at me that I wanted to get on here before I forgot. So they jumped from day 2 to day 8 with the housewarming party, and then I couldn't tell what the Ouija board spelled out after George. So hopefully, I've got your episode 3 podcast downloaded. It's queued up next. So hopefully, it'll show you guys were able to catch what was spelled out. And so much better when you actually are able to watch the whole thing, while you're still awake and coherent. I realized the last time I watched it, I must have fallen asleep. I don't know how I fell asleep. Well, I know how I fell asleep. But anyway, wow, such a good episode. I've only watched it twice, so I really want to watch it again even, but I need to get this in to you guys. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. I can't wait to see the rest of this season. It's really good. I like, if they're going to do kind of an individual story each time, it might be interesting to see how they do it and what happens. But can't wait to listen to the podcast about this one, guys. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much for that, Steve. Definitely episode 3 was pretty confusing. I wonder how you got on with episode 4, because I thought there was even more difficult stuff in this one to piece everything together. This definitely took a couple of views for me to get all my thoughts together. As for the Ouija board that the kids are using, I think it spells out George to begin with when the kids ask who is it that they're speaking to, and with Dee in the room, that's her father effectively, and then it goes on to spell George is dead is the phrase that's in there, and that's when Dee thinks that the kids are playing a practical joke on her and runs off into the house. So that's what's in there with the Ouija board.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve, for the feedback. Yeah, really glad you're enjoying it, because it's so enjoyable as a TV show, and It's fascinating. Just the storylines, the context, everything about it is fascinating. It's really great TV.
Absolutely.
And this episode similarly is just great. I think actually for Dreadful Podcast, for TV podcast industries, I think we're on a really rich vein of TV shows that we're covering right back with Watchmen as well. But I mean, all the shows, dare I say, that we've covered are great, but just the consistent high level. And I think just because there's so much that I think we're learning from a show like this. Same with Watchmen, same with City of Angels, with Penny Dreadful. That it feels really rich and interesting, fascinating, in parts fascinating, in parts frightening.
Exactly.
In terms of the horror and the reality and what people of color experienced in like 50s US and before and after and since. It's just like, wow. I know in this episode, sort of tying it into certain things happening on this side of the Atlantic as well.
Definitely really, really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for that, Steve. And thanks to everybody else for all of your feedback. Really good to hear from all of you. Please keep sending it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much to everyone who provided their feedback. Really good questions, theories, discussions, corrections. You name it. Really, really good. So interesting. To get your thoughts on it. And thanks so much for joining us. We hope you stay subscribed to the podcast. And if you enjoy what you hear, why not share it with your friends? Sharing the podcast is sharing the love, for sure. You can also, if you want to, subscribe and support us over on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. But with that, we will be moving on to episode 5 next week, when we will be back with Lovecraft Country, season 1, episode 5, Strange Case. Yes, I imagine there will be lots of strangeness in episode 5. Can't wait to see it.
Definitely looking forward to more Lovecraft Country next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you again next time. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, fellow Dreadfuls, for joining us. It's, as always, a pleasure speaking with you. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep discovering. Just don't go into any cavernous vaults, otherwise you may be going down a big hole.
Absolutely. You might be walking all the way from Boston to Chicago. Bye.
Bye.